Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest crimes that have ever occurred. Today, we'll be looking at the life and crimes of one of the most infamous outlaws of all time, Lester Gillis, aka BABYFACE Nelson. Lester Gillis was born on December 6, 1908, in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up in the city's rough and tumble West Side neighborhood. As a young man, he developed a reputation as a troublemaker and petty criminal, often getting into fights and stealing cars with his friends. The nickname Babyface was given to him by his gang of fellow juvenile delinquents due to his relatively young appearance. Babyface had a small, weary build and stood only 5 feet 4 inches tall. He turned 25 just a few months before his death. By the time Lester Gillis reached adulthood, he had already established himself as a skilled and daring criminal. He committed a number of robberies and other crimes across the Midwest, working alone or with small gangs of fellow outlaws. Although Lester had worked alone for some time, he soon realized the benefits of having competent partners. Lester met Alvin Karpis, a ruthless criminal with a shady past, and the two quickly formed a formidable partnership. Together they robbed banks, gas stations, grocery stores, and anything else that could turn a quick buck. Their violent methods and disregard for human life made them feared and respected among their peers. As news of their exploits spread, Lester and Alvin attracted the attention of the FBI, which sent to special agents to track them down. But the cunning outlaws managed to evade capture, disappearing into the vastness of the Midwest. Lester and Alvin's partnership continued to grow, and soon they found themselves rubbing shoulders with the most infamous gangsters of the era, including John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd. However, Lester's association with these larger criminal organizations proved to be short-lived. One incident that led to the end of Nelson's partnership with Karpis occurred in St. Joseph, Missouri. According to reports, Nelson confronted Karpis after discovering that his associate had stolen money from a payroll he had just robbed. It is said that Nelson punched Karpis several times in the face before finally knocking him out cold with a bottle. Nelson then tossed the unconscious Karpis in a car and drove him to a nearby lake, intending to drown him. However, Nelson changed his mind at the last minute and instead dumped Karpis on the side of the road, leaving him to make his way back to civilization on foot. This confrontation marked the end of Nelson's partnership with Karpis, and he went on to form new alliances with criminals like John Dillinger. In the early 1930s, Lester Gillis became acquainted with John Dillinger, an infamous gangster who had recently escaped from prison. The two quickly formed a close bond, and Dillinger took Nelson under his wing, teaching him the tricks of the trade and helping him to plan and execute daring robberies across the Midwest. Together, they amassed a fortune in cash and jewels and became public enemies no doubt one. However, Dillinger's luck eventually ran out on July 22, 1934, when he was shot and killed by law enforcement officers in a hail of bullets. With Dillinger gone, Nelson found himself without a mentor and on the run from the law. Nelson's own gang. Despite his success as a member of Dillinger's gang, Lester Gillis was never able to form his own crew of outlaws. Instead, he continued to work with the remaining members of Dillinger's gang after his death. This group of misfits and criminals became known as the Bloody Benders due to their violent and ruthless nature. The gang continued to terrorize the Midwest, robbing banks and killing anyone who got in their way. But their reign of terror was short-lived. On November 27, 1934, an informant tipped off authorities to the whereabouts of Lester Gillis and his gang. The gang got caught off guard by federal agents in Barrington, Illinois. It was a wild moment. 2 special agents spotted the vehicle near Barrington, Illinois. Nelson brought his car around behind the agents, and Chase fired 5 rounds from an automatic rifle into the agent's car. Inspector Cowley and Special Agent Herman Edward Hollis approached in another automobile and began pursuing Nelson and his partner John Paul Chase. Suddenly, Nelson veered off Northwest Highway at the entrance to the Northside Park in Barrington, Illinois, and stopped before Cowley and Hollis could get out of their car. Nelson and Chase began firing automatic weapons at them. Nelson and his associates were killed, but not before they had exchanged gunfire with more than 100 officers from various agencies. Lester's wife, Helen Gillis, had been lying in a field during the battle. She jumped into the government vehicle as Chase was driving it away. Nelson's widow was arrested on November 29, 1934, having violated the terms of her parole. Helen Gillis was sentenced to serve 1 year and 1 day in the Women's Federal Reformatory in Milam, Michigan. The shootout was one of the largest and most intense of its kind in history. While Lester Gillis, aka Babyface Nelson, may have appeared young and unassuming, he was actually a ruthless and calculating criminal. Those who knew him described him as dangerous and unpredictable, with a short fuse and a penchant for violence. During his lifetime, Nelson earned a reputation as a fearless outlaw who wasn't afraid to take on the authorities. He was known for his daring bank robberies and shootouts with law enforcement, as well as his uncanny ability to evade capture. However, despite his reputation, Nelson's personal life was shrouded in mystery. He kept his private life under wraps, and little is known about his relationships or personal beliefs. He simply wanted money and power, and he wasn't afraid to use violence to get it. It's possible that Nelson's reputation as a ruthless killer was exaggerated by law enforcement and the media in order to paint him as a monster and justify their violent actions against him. However, there's also evidence to suggest that he was genuinely dangerous and unpredictable. Witnesses to his crimes described him as a remorseless killer who showed no mercy. Despite his relatively young age at the time of his death, Nelson had already established a long criminal record, including bank robbery, murder, and auto theft. He was known for his daring exploits with the Dillinger Gang and his ability to evade law enforcement. However, he was ultimately killed in a shootout with police in 1934. The question remains, was Nelson truly as ruthless as they say? Or was he simply a victim of circumstance? You decide. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and comment below with your thoughts on the life and crimes of Lester Gillis, aka Babyface Nelson. We hope you learned something new here at our channel. And if you did, please hit the like button. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.